Welcome back to another episode of the HoopBall Fantasy Basketball Pregame Show. It is February 24th, 2021 here. It is me, Alan Strokey. I'm back for another episode and joined by my friend, first time appearance on the show today, Marcus Braden. How you doing, man? I got that last name right?
Yeah, you nailed it, man. You did. Yeah, I'm doing well, man. It's a pleasure to be back doing some shows, but specifically on this pregame show. This is something I've been looking forward to getting involved in, man. So I'm ready for what should be a great night of NBA hoops, a lot of games. So I'm looking forward to diving into them.
Yeah, we got a lot of interesting games tonight. We're really happy to have you on. Tons of fantasy angles, too. Got a lot of very interesting teams, particularly the Detroit Pistons of late have been pretty noteworthy. So we will be sure to touch on them and everyone else. For all y'all tuning in for the first time or coming back and returning, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the HoopBall YouTube page. Drop a like on the video. Much appreciated, as always. And follow Marcus and I on Twitter. My handle's right there on the bottom of the screen. And what's yours again, Marcus? Is it just your name?
Yeah, so it's actually Mark, M-A-R-C _ Anthony 35.
Okay. Mark _ Anthony 35. We'll drop that in the comments too, so everyone can make sure that they reach out to you at the end there. So without further ado, let's get going on the first game of the night. We have the Golden State Warriors visiting the Indiana Pacers. Warriors continue to truck along on their Eastern Conference road trip. There are no injuries on the report for the Warriors. They've really gotten past that now with James Wiseman and Kevon Looney back in the fold. And basically the main thing we're watching from a fantasy perspective is that center dynamic. It's about Draymond Green, who's been playing the majority of the center minutes, what his role looks like going forward, what those two centers roles look like going forward. It appears that Juan Toscano Anderson is kind of out of the rotation now, which means that Draymond Green is absorbing the majority of the power forward minutes. He's still playing some center too, definitely still getting some small ball action. But Looney and Wiseman combined played 36 minutes in both of their returns in their last game. I know Wiseman's the name that everyone's most interested in. The rookie has jumped from the starting lineup to the bench. He has that interesting upside that we're sort of waiting for the slow progression for him. Personally, I don't have very high expectations in, your standard 12-team leagues for Wiseman. I don't know if he's going to play enough to collect the boards and blocks necessary to, get those big man stats that you'd want from him to really make a big impact. I'm mostly concerned about how many minutes at center Draymond's going to be playing, whether the rebounding and block numbers that we've seen from him over the last month continue to be at the area that we thought they would be, where they have been, just if they go down at all. I don't know. What about you, Marcus? Anything on the Warriors side that you want to touch on that I haven't hit?
No, I think you hit it well. You covered all the key points. I think you're right on with Draymond, because it's just he's such a dynamic player. It's funny because even as you were describing it, I just thought what he was doing was Draymond being Draymond, but that is a really good point as when the centers come in and he starts to get more of a power forward role. Like, I mean, he'll still put up, solid defensive numbers, but he could certainly take a dip there because it's going to be more of a, center rotation between Looney and Wiseman. And I'm with you, man. Like James Wiseman, number 2 pick, he's a dynamic big. I think he has a great game. I think he can be good. It's just not going to be this year. It's not going to be anytime soon, no matter how many, solid games he has in the mix. And I think even at ESPN, he's holding in 58% of leagues in there and just the majority of leagues. I know a guy in my competitive league held him, and didn't even drop him when he was out. So I think a lot of people will come to find, as you mentioned, like, maybe it's best to move on.
Yeah, the name recognition.
A little too caught up in the hype.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there. I didn't. The audio skipped. I thought that you were you hit a pause point there, but no, you're totally right. Wiseman has a lot more name recognition than actual value. And to be fair, too, to the Draymond Green concerns, because we were thinking that maybe the rebounds would come down and the blocks would come down if he's spending less time at center. The numbers he put up in his last game were exactly the same that he had been producing in his previous outings without those two centers. So it's been encouraging what we've seen out of him so far. But you're totally right. The Wiseman roster rate is far higher than the production would tell you. Well, anyway, that's kind of it for the Warriors. Why don't we head on to the Pacers side of things? Marcus, what do you got for us?
Well, I mean, I think as far as from a fantasy perspective, 2 guys right away, like do you want to key in on? I know myself, I was looking at Justin Holiday as potential pickup. He's been in and out, and I was actually duped myself because I think when I picked him up, he actually it was during the game they had postponed. So, that knocks him down the game for the week. But outside of that, TJ McConnell's been pretty good. I mean, LeVert that a TJ. But TJ, I know there was some talk of him, being healthy, being ready to go and everything. And I mean, he hasn't even started his on-court work. He's just getting there. So I think it's a good, disclaimer to make to not get too caught up. And, like, do I need to rush and get TJ? Is he going to be back soon? I think he's definitely worth the stash. I don't think he's an immediate stash, as he'll probably be weeks away, from when he actually after the All-Star break. He'll probably be even weeks away from when he gets on the court, let alone starts playing. So that's really it as far as injuries go. I think it's going to be, your usual production from your top guys. Malcolm Brogdon's going to, do what he does. He's been having a great year pretty much between Sabonis and Turner in their own ways, right? They've really taken a big step forward from a fantasy point of view. And I think the new coach, Nate, I'm not even going to attempt his last name because I know it's hard, but I think he's had a positive impact. So I think that's really it. You'll get the full-in guys like Justin Holiday, like I mentioned. Jeremy Lamb solidified a good role there. So I think where you would have most fringe guys kind of step in there and absorb some of the minutes and produce, it's pretty much going to be limited to those guys, with the exception of Justin Holiday, who's already been logging heavy minutes and pretty much been a pretty good steals and threes kind of guy. So
totally,
that's what I'm seeing on my end. How about you?
No, you hit the nail on the head, and I liked your point too about Karis LeVert, the TJ McConnell LeVert dynamic, because you're right. He's good to stash, but there's no guarantee. When at what point he comes back, we don't know that. That's not locked in, and the role that he's going to have too is pretty much a question mark as well. I mean, he has a lot of. When this team is fully healthy and TJ Warren's in the mix too, I don't really know if he's like the 4th option offensively, 5th option. There's a lot of question marks there. And McConnell has been so solid in the assists and steals without Victor Oladipo that he's not the kind of guy that I'm willing to cast off right now with all that uncertainty. He definitely has a spot in most 9-category leagues. If anything, I'd say all 12 team settings, because those numbers. They're elite what he does. I mean, they are elite in those 2 categories, and the assist one is always a very scarce one, so it's a pretty important note for him. So we'll just go ahead right now. Sorry, you got something else on the Indiana side?
Sorry, yeah. Well, one quick thing, kind of going back to the Warriors. I just seen like a live report or something, and I was going to touch on this, but I can just quickly mention it now since it came up. About the James Wiseman thing. Another thing is there's going to be that. I think there's going to just be that sharing minutes. There's going to be that split between him and Looney.
Yeah.
And I actually just seen Looney's starting tonight. I mean, while Looney isn't the most appealing fantasy option, Coach Kerr's going to go with what works best for the team, right? So even if that reduces James Wiseman's minutes, it's going to be a lot tougher to, justify holding him in most leagues when, his minutes take a hit. So we'll see how that goes going forward.
Yeah, it's definitely something to monitor. 16 in his last game. We'll see how much he gets up on the floor tonight and whether the Kevon Looney starting situation continues to be a thing that keeps him in a bench role. So next game on the docket, we have the Celtics and the Hawks, both teams on the second night of a back-to-back. We'll start on the Boston side, where the only name on the injury report is Kemba Walker. He's resting this game because, that's as he does on second nights of back-to-back. So we'll see Peyton Pritchard absorb some of that role. He's okay as a streamer in my mind. He's been pretty hit or miss in this kind of capacity, but he can score and hit threes if he gets it going, which is not impossible against this Hawks team right now. But as far as the big picture stuff here, we're really paying attention to Rob Williams, who had that really nice stretch when Daniel Tice missed a couple of games where he really got involved with the defensive stats, played a lot more, and even had a nice game or two after Tice came back. And everyone knows that his permitted upside is nuts. It's really it's game-changing level, the rate that he can get block shots, steals, rebounds. And, it's really going to be interesting to see if he can ever cut into some of the playing time of the guys ahead of him, Tristan Thompson in particular. Brad Stevens had a quote earlier this week how he has appreciated what he's seen out of Williams and that he hopes that his minutes will peak towards the end of the year. Now, for like a fantasy perspective, it's interesting to take note of that. I don't know exactly what it means. It kind of means nothing. But if we're to take Brad Stevens, that we should expect there'd be more minutes for Williams to carve out, particularly later in the season. That's a pretty appealing thing to keep in mind for playoff time. So we're really just kind of seeing how productive he is in his usual 16 to 19 minute bench role. And ultimately, just if he stays productive, how long will it take until Brad Stevens ultimately has to make a move between him and Thompson? What about you, Marcus? Anything on the Celtics side that's popping out?
No. I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, Peyton Pritchard, it's going to be curious to see what he can do. I know they were kind of like divvying up the minutes a little more to not just him. Other guys were, sharing minutes and stuff. So I think they're better off just giving him, a lot of those minutes. Well, I think Aaron Naismith, if I'm not mistaken, he got a good bulk of the minutes, didn't he? I guess when Kemba was missing and.
Yeah, he definitely steps up here and there as well. Pritchard seems to get the first opportunities at ball handling, but Naismith definitely has more shot attempts too.
Absolutely. And I think, Naismith has earned that, right? But I just think when the lion's share of it's going to Peyton Pritchard, he makes for a great fantasy option. He's a good impact player. So, you just hope to see more of that. Other than that, I think, what you said about Time Lord, Robbie Williams, that's right on point. I think the tough thing is, like, especially with Brad Stevens' comment, is like he has such a tantalizing upside. He's such a great player to have. It's just how long until we actually get to that point and hold him, because he could be taking up a roster spot where with limited games in the schedule and just his per game production, it's just kind of, not really doing it for you. So it's like, it kind of comes to a point. Is it really justify? Like, can I justify holding him? It depends where you're at in the standings and everything, but I think he's definitely worth the hold. He's going to get there. I mean, especially when, he's kind of like that Nerlens Noel when he's giving you 3+ stops in a game and the occasional block and steals. They're such a specialist. You can justify holding them for that. So any bump in production or usage just makes them better. So I probably would hold, but I definitely could understand if you're in a pinch. You got to make a push. You got to stream that roster spot and at least dump him for now, but definitely keep an eye out on him if you do. So,
for sure, no, I agree with all of that. He's a big boomer bust play, so definitely take your position in the standings into account if you want to take a gamble on them.
Yeah.
So let's go to the Hawks side of things. What are you seeing there?
Well, I know this is kind of a bummer for a lot of people. Cam Reddish going out. I say that just because he, started showing signs. Right, he's kind of just looked like a player was kind of on the upswing, and he's another one who has like a very unique game. So after stringing together a good 2 or 3 games, he was ruled probable. Then he was downgraded with the Achilles soreness to doubtful and didn't play. So you got to figure that's pretty concerning. Especially any times you have something dealing with an Achilles. So that's something to pay in mind. The bigger one, obviously, John Collins, who's day-to-day with the concussion. John Collins, it's just interesting because, you think about the hype before the season. Really, he had potential to be a bottom-round, first-round guy. He finishes like a second-round player last year. He's just a great player overall, doesn't hurt you anywhere. So it was just tough to want to stomach the idea of him taking that hit, as we've seen, because Capella has just been thriving in Atlanta. And whether or not he's on the trade block and everything is just tough to say. And now with this injury on top of that, you got to wonder, sure, if he's ready to go and doesn't have a concussion, he'll play. I like to think so, and that can be a 1, maybe 2 game miss. But if he does have a concussion and with everything going on, does this factor into him missing additional time? I just think with them openly saying they wouldn't extend him possibly being a trade piece, and them, stating what they would like to get in return, I just don't think they're going to rush it with Collins, right? I don't think they're going to prevent him from playing like a Blake Griffin or like an Andre Drummond situation. But depending on the severity of this, and, hopefully not, but we could see if he does actually have a concussion, which I'm hoping not, but something to keep in mind, I definitely think. And really, I mean, most Collins owners have been doing. You really just got to ride it out. There's not much you can do if you got the IR spot and he goes out. Stick him in there, but it's kind of the best you can do at this point.
Yeah, and at the moment he's still a game time call.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like there's no certainty around it. The Reddish point, like you said, he was starting to produce a little bit better as of late. He's had a very inconsistent season. The Achilles thing is actually something that he had dealt with earlier in the year. He had missed a few games before and it went away, but it appears that it's flared up again. So he came into today as doubtful. So it's possible that he has some more missed games ahead of him. With those two out of the way, you figure Danilo Gallinari is the guy who's going to step into a larger role, but John Collins is available. It says the chat just announced. Yep, that just came through. So Collins is in. Awesome. I was just going to talk about Danilo Gallinari maybe getting a boost, but he's been terrible lately. So we don't have to worry about that. John Collins is in. Great for those fantasy managers you've mentioned, and great for me. I would like to see them beat the Celtics tonight. So,
yeah, definitely. That's perfect.
So there's really nothing else to touch on then. The Hawks are really just a four-man crew right now. It's Trey, it's Capella, it's Collins, and it's Kevin Huerter. So with that in mind, we will just go ahead and move on to the next game, which is the Houston Rockets visiting the Cleveland Cavaliers. Houston's injury report's a little lengthy. They have Victor Oladipo with a right foot strain. He's been listed questionable unless some news just dropped about him. Nope. Okay, we're good. We're up to date now. Oladipo's questionable. Eric Gordon is questionable. I think they're both considered game time calls, but they both came into today listed as questionable. And they've PJ Tucker, meanwhile, is probable with a quad issue. And of course, DeMarcus Cousins, I think he's actually officially been waived. Yeah, he's officially been waived, so he's off the team. With that, so if Oladipo and Gordon aren't playing tonight, we are going to continue seeing Jayshawn Tate, David Nwaba, Daniel House. Those three guys are going to absorb a ton of usage, ton of playing time at the forward at the forward spots. Tate is the guy who seems to have established the highest upside of that bunch. He's been a defensive monster all year long, and he's been really good lately at getting more involved in the rebounding and passing game as well. He's just, the more he plays, the more well-rounded his fantasy game becomes. So he's definitely the guy I'm most focused on. Aside from him, Daniel House is also someone I'm pretty interested in, mostly because he's been sort of dialing it up a little bit recently. He missed a lot of time with, I believe, either a COVID exposure or a COVID diagnosis, but he seems to be up to his usual playing time. The three-point shots going in, and with the combination of rebounds and defensive stats, makes him somewhat appealing, particularly if PJ Tucker gets moved. That would mean that House is likely going to be the starting power forward the rest of the way. We're keeping an eye on David Nwaba too, just after a really hot scoring game. You don't expect him to score. He's more of a rebounds and steals guy, but if he's hot, keep feeding him the rock, especially if Oladipo and Gordon are out. There's a lot of opportunity for him there. And then the last guy we need to touch on is Justin Patton, who is the only man on this roster who is taller than 6'7". He's he got an opportunity in his last game to see close to 20 minutes and didn't play that bad for a guy who hasn't played some NBA basketball in a while. He had 3 block shots and I believe 6 or 7 rebounds too, which if you're in a pinch and you need to stream some big man stats, he figures to see some playing time tonight going up against Jarrett Allen in that Cavs front court. He'll definitely, you figure he sees close to the same amount of time that we saw last game. So an interesting block streamer until Christian Wood comes back. So yeah, that's it on the Rockets. A lot of different guys to keep tabs on. Marcus, anything else you'd like to highlight there?
One name kind of mentioned, worth throwing in there, Sterling Brown, because I know that people have got the early jump on David Nwaba, Jayshawn Tate, probably if you're in a pretty competitive league. And Sterling Brown can have some sneaky value. He can get you a D stats or two. He knows how to score. So I just think with them being down so many bodies and Houston really overall this whole wave and boogie, I think it just really is fitting to just the type of season they're having with the departure of James Harden. You figure PJ Tucker inevitably gets moved for some younger assets or, future draft picks. So it's really just getting to that point where there's so many moving pieces. So I think Sterling Brown being a guy who's coming back from injury, healthy, he's playing. He's someone to kind of, look out for if you need points, and, you need some steals. He can kind of fulfill that role. And he's looked good in the last few games. So if there's not a David Nwaba, if there's not a Jayshawn Tate on your wire, Sterling Brown isn't so much of a hole per se, but he can be a good stream, especially on a night like tonight when some of those guys can miss some time.
That's a good point. He's a very solid producer when given the playing time, especially if those two guards are out. That's a good avenue for him. That's a good point. What about the Cavs side? What do you got on that side?
Well, hold on. Let me pull this here. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Depth chart.
It's not pretty.
Yeah,
say that much.
Yeah, no, it's not pretty at all. I mean, well, one noteworthy thing is Taurean Prince is probable. Yeah. So he'll probably come back, and he was playing okay in his first few games. He was really looking like the Taurean Prince of old, the guy who really had that fantasy-friendly game on Atlanta way back when. So I mean, he's someone. I mean, Kevin Love is still out. You gotta assume he's close to returning, but you just don't know for sure. So obviously, Nance should be out past the All-Star break. So I mean, as far as Taurean goes, I think if you need that kind of just all-around production, he's worth the look, especially if you want to stream him tonight. As far as him just coming back, no need to mention the Andre Drummond stuff. We know he's just more or less not with the team anymore. So
yeah, he's out.
Yeah. So besides that, I mean. It's just hard to say with like who to key in on. Sometimes Isaac Okoro, he's a good defensive specialist.
Yeah.
I assume he's floating on some waiver wire. So if you need him, I mean, he comes in handy. And probably guys like Garland, guys like that are probably rostered. Probably already on the team. So as far as injuries, those are the most noteworthy things. Like I said, Kevin Love. If you got him, you hope he's coming back soon. But Taurean Prince is probably the most noteworthy as he's coming back tonight and was putting some good games up.
Absolutely, yeah. He's the guy I'm most interested in seeing the ramp up, how he looks playing next to Jarrett Allen primarily, because I think that his injury coincided with the Andre Drummond removal news. Yeah. So just see how he looks in that coming back from that injury after a 4-game absence. So we'll move on to the Raptors visiting the Miami Heat. On the Raptors side of things, Kyle Lowry is probable to play in this one after missing a couple of games with a thumb injury. And they're a really straightforward fantasy team. Because now that Lowry is likely going to be in, him, Freddie VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam are all healthy again for the first time in almost a month. Yeah. It all comes down to what happens with Norm Powell, who had been absorbing a larger opportunity with one of those 4 guys out at different points in that month-long stretch. He's been terrific. But as we saw at the beginning of the season, and even in that first half of that one game where Lowry got hurt, when they're all clicking, he is cast aside. The shots aren't there anymore. He's not doing a whole lot else in the box score. So really, it's just a matter of how does he respond? Does he regress again back to that unproductive bench or 5th starter role? Because we did see Nick Nurse experiment with starting all 5 of those guys together in that one game where Lowry got hurt. Really, it's just, I honestly, if you had Powell on your team, I hope you took advantage of the sell high window when you could, because I'm not optimistic that it's going to work out for him. What about you, Marcus? Anything on that side?
Man, I'm right there with you. And I just think when you watch him play, it comes with the flow of the game, right? He's more of a big scorer, gets you the threes. He does it at a high clip. So there's the efficiency. And, he's a nice still streamer. But like you said, like a lot of those things are an indication of when he's getting the big run, right? Getting a lot of burn. And when that's not there, he's not there. So I'm with you, because like it's kind of funny you said that. One guy in my league, in my competitive league, has him. And he really just wrote it out until now. And he's been kind of, adverse for trading and stuff. But like that is like there's no better player than Norman Powell who's going to be the guy that you probably hold and you're benefiting from with his just huge spike in production. He's killing it. And then it's just going to fall off. That I think at this point going forward, I'm not going to be surprised when he gets dropped in most leagues. And I say that now because one thing you want to know is, as we kind of stated with, how he just cast aside, as you mentioned. Yeah. Don't just get so caught up with Norman Powell that you have to hold him when all of that team is healthy. Because I understand if someone goes down, he's a great guy to go and grab. He's a huge difference maker, as we've seen. But that can be the difference of not having a guy who you can stream in, and he's giving you minimal production, and it's more hurting you than helping you. So when others, when they're injured, he can slide in there and be the difference maker. He will be. But outside of that, if the opportunity's not there, I think we know his value. We know who he is. So it's just important to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And,
it's a good point.
Not get too caught up on it. So.
Yeah. You watch for a few games. Watch for a few games, see how it goes. But you nailed it. It's one of the toughest things is to know when to give up on a guy that had been producing, but then situations changed that. So that's everyone should keep that in mind going forward with Powell.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's just move on to the Miami side of things, where they have a couple of injuries, I believe, that we were waiting to hear word on. That we heard that Tyler Hero has been ruled out for this game, but Goran Dragic's been ruled in after a pretty lengthy absence with that ankle injury. So with that news, Marcus, what are your thoughts from the Miami Heat right now?
Well, one thing in particular, we've seen, it's funny because we're kind of drawing a parallel between Norman Powell and this guy, Kendrick Nunn, right? When everyone's healthy, Kendrick Nunn, he's just a non-factor. In fact, Spoelstra doesn't even like to play him that much, right? You figure when this team's rolling, they're kind of more seeing him as a guy who can come in and you respect what he does. But with the team they're trying to form in the mission they're on after being in the NBA Finals last year, if he can be a swing piece to get more of what they need, then so be it, right? And that's the difference between that team being healthy and when he just fills in, he can get you 20-plus with a full line, as he's been playing very well as of late. So I say that because that's where the parallel comes in between him and Norm Powell. But I like to think with Goran Dragic coming in and Hero being out, you may see somewhat of a hit in Nunn's value. But I honestly think for him, he'll just kind of slide into that Tyler Hero role. So I don't think his value should change much, and he should continue to thrive there and play really well. I think if he's on your waiver wire anywhere, he's definitely worth a grab with so much uncertainty. And, Tyler Hero just kind of being bothered by this hip thing, it looks like we don't know how long that could take. They're certainly not going to rush him back. So I think, everything else is probably as is, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, the usual suspects there. But, Kendrick Nunn is a guy who I think his value is safe in the short term, just because with Tyler Hero being out, he should just slide right into that role. So I like his outlook.
Yeah. As long as one of those two are out, he should still have an opportunity. But like you mentioned at the top, Spoelstra, when he has his full deck, he tends to keep him relegated to a bench role. But he's played really well. I mean, the scoring has definitely taken a step up. It was already good last year, but I'd say it's even better this year. And what's also notable with him is that, at least in terms of fantasy, the steals have come a little more consistently for him this year, at least during the stretch of play, which is something that's pretty notable because that kind of gives him a path to more sustained 9-category league value. So I agree. If you have none on your team, don't drop him yet. The Dragic news is a big hit in like the macro, but until Hero is back in there, Nunn should continue to see opportunity that he has. So with that, we'll go on to our next game. And by the way, if you're tuning in for the first time, you're just catching us in the middle of the show, please drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel. We do these every day, and we got some exciting stuff in the works for you guys going forward too. So if you're, much appreciated, as always.
Absolutely.
Next game, we have the Timberwolves visiting the Chicago Bulls. The Wolves have had some interesting stuff going on of late. Well, before we talk about the coaching change, which is the big thing that I'm watching, Jarrett Culver has been ruled in for this game. He's going to be limited to around 15 minutes, but he's been out for over a month now, or roughly a month now, since late January. And, he just another name to throw into the pot and who we should be watching as Chris Finch takes the helm here and sort of reorganizes the team. And the comments that he's made have more so focused on, he's not trying to come in and make wide, sweeping changes. But the one in particular that he made sure that everyone knows is that he believes that Karl Anthony Towns should be the center of everything that they do, be it on the offensive side, just generating offense through him as a facilitator, getting him more shots, all of it. He thinks that he wants to reorganize the offense in that way. And in their first game, we saw that the shot distribution had Towns with the most, about 19, I think it was. Beasley second with about 16 shots, and Anthony Edwards with 13. And that's only notable because since Cat returned from his COVID diagnosis, he was third on the team in shots per game, which, come on. how are you gonna do that, Ryan Saunders? Right. So obviously, with this news, you figure that could have an impact on the usage for Beasley and Anthony Edwards moving forward. Perhaps other guys across the roster too, but when you think of just trying to get Towns more opportunities, those two, particularly Beasley, who led the team in shot attempts per game during that stretch, figure to lose out. And we didn't quite see that for Beasley in that first game. He still got his fill-ins. It's just a matter of what's it look like on an average when we're talking 5 games into this, 10 games into this. So I'm really just watching the shot distribution on this team, who gets what opportunity. And beyond that, just sort of the other rotational quirks that comes with a new coach, especially that power forward spot where you have Jared Vanderbilt and Jaden McDaniels, 2 guys who are really interesting players with a lot of defensive potential, and curious if one of them breaks free from the other and curries more favor with the new head coach. So those are all the new things I'm watching there with this new coach. And Culver eventually might compete with Josh Okogie for playing time, but as we mentioned, 15 minutes limits in this game, not quite yet. What about you, Marcus? Anything in particular on this T-Wolves team?
Yeah, a few things. Well, first of all, I mean, I think that's a really good point you made about Cat because, you know, that's as it should be. Everything should definitely be running through him. It's odd to think. I didn't even know that, but it's odd to think that he was 3rd in shot attempts, you know.
I had to look into it when he made those comments because I'm just like, was it not already? It's Karl Anthony Towns. But yeah, he was 3rd on the team in shot attempts. They were roughly equal to one another, but still, I mean, Beasley, I think, had 2 more per game, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I agree with you. And I think one thing that's kind of interesting is I feel like Derek Culver was kind of earning trust more with Ryan Saunders. And, you know, once Cat came back, you kind of seen that he wasn't just playing 12 minutes and 18 where he just produced, right? He was getting like up, you know, mid-20s even. So I actually picked him up in the league, and I remember thinking, like, if those minutes hold, he could really do some good things here, right? And I think with the new coach coming in, that kind of solidified his role in limited minutes. They know what he can do. They like him on the floor. But he's really a D, you know, specialist at best at this point. And I think that as the more runs through Cat, like you said, he's going to see limited minutes. I think he's a guy who, you know, you kind of just have to pass on. Similar with Jaden McDaniels. I love his game, right? But I think barring any injury, he's going to be pretty limited too. If you need a D specialist also, he's got to look into. One guy I really like actually is Jordan McLaughlin right now.
Yeah, he's been good.
He's getting good run, and he's kind of that assist specialist who can get you some points, decent number of rebounds. So with the Wolves having a game tonight and 2 more games, another back-to-back for this week, I definitely think he's a guy to look into if you need that assist streamer. With everything changing, he's filling, you know, he's filling in quite nicely with the absence of D'Angelo Russell, even with Ricky Rubio and Malik Beasley playing, right? He's getting good minutes off the second unit and producing. So he's definitely a guy who may be floating around most leagues, who is definitely an intriguing short-term streamer.
Yeah, the assists have been pretty consistent. So in that stretch without Russell, it's close to like 6 per game or 5, a little like mid 5s, and that's valuable if you need the assists. So definitely another name to watch. On the Chicago side, though, no injuries of note to report on. So what do we have on, and aside from the main ones with Lowry, Markkanen, and Otto Porter? So what's sticking out to you there?
Well, I think with those guys gone, obviously Thaddeus Young's been real good. He's been thriving. One guy who's kind of been putting up sneaky value I like is Garrett Temple.
Yeah, I had him on here too.
He's been playing pretty well.
Yeah.
He's been playing really good, and so the thing that's kind of interesting is you got Thaddeus Young. You know, he's doing his distributing stuff in the front court, and I think in the back court, right, you have your Tomas Satoransky, who's kind of more of a dimes, puts up a few shots, he'll do it efficiently. Then you got Denzel Valentine, who's helped fill in that void too. And he's just more a 3-point streamer, more in 3 and steals. And aside from that, I feel like Garrett Temple's a perfect blend of the both of them, right? The last game he had 9 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Pretty solid for your streamer. But other than that, he's scored in double digits, you know, got about 2 or 3 stocks a game. He's not killing your percentages in the process, shooting mid-40s. I think he's definitely a good guy to have. He's left. You know, he's logging 35, 40 minutes. I think he's really going to have some value in the short term. So I think he appears to be the biggest guy outside of, you know, your usual guys who's getting bigger minutes and actually, you know, benefiting from those. So I like his outlook.
Yeah, he's been playing crazy high minutes, like close to like 35 per game in the month of February. And he has that all around value that he just kind of does a little bit of everything. He's not really the kind of guy who will pop for you necessarily in a head-to-head league, but you just he's been like about a top 120 player over the month, which isn't nothing. I mean, that's just worth, that's just sneaky value, gives you a little bit of everything if you're on a roto league, as long as these guys are out. He might be someone that you could plug in for a little stretch here, and he's not going to really hurt you anywhere. So we've got 4 games left on the docket. Again, if you guys are just tuning in, we are going to now talk about the Pistons and Pelicans game and the Spurs and Thunder game. Two games with a lot of notes, especially with the Spurs side having not played over in a week. But again, you're just tuning in, please drop a like below, subscribe to the channel. We always appreciate your support in any way possible. So let's just get please. We really do appreciate it, guys. So the Pistons, they are the team du jour right now. Everyone is talking about Saben Lee, man. He has been the point guard over the last 2 games to really take advantage of the opportunity. Dennis Smith has been the starter, but it's been Saben Lee who's had 2 really good games in a row. He's flying off of waiver wires everywhere, and for good reason. I mean, Delon Wright is by the way, he's the main guy on the injury report, aside from Jeremy Grant, who is being rested in this game, which is kind of strange behavior to do with your 26-year-old borderline all-star. But it's the Pistons. I get it.
Only in Detroit.
I mean, so that's happening, which means there'll be a lot of offense to go around tonight. But Saben Lee, just to touch on him, he is. The book isn't very long on him. I don't even. He's either a 2nd-round draft pick or an undrafted rookie. I'm not sure which, but whatever the case was, he was not a highly touted prospect coming into the season. But the opportunity is there for him as long as Delon Wright is out. I would just caution that this is the type of situation that is ripe for a hot stretch, like burning really quick, and then it's possible that teams start to figure him out after a little while and his production could dip. I know that he's not the greatest free throw shooter in the world. That seems to be a big weakness for him, but the scoring stats are there. The assists and rebounds are there. He's getting just enough for you, and the steals are appealing too. I mean, there's a good reason he's being picked up in a lot of places right now. It's just going to be a matter of how long this goes on for. I mean, maybe in the off chance that he Jeremy Lin's this thing and he just keeps going, and it's just like his job to lose. But again, we've seen in these type of situations, it's good to, be optimistic but cautiously so. So there's that, and then obviously beyond that, we're just kind of continuing to watch Saddiq Bey as the full-time starter. Probably going to see a larger bump without Jeremy Grant tonight. I'll be curious to see if we see any minutes for Sekou Doumbouya. See if he can get involved at the power forward spot at all with both Griffin and Grant out. Doumbouya had that perfect example. Doumbouya had a stretch last year where he sort of popped on the scene with like this, these rebounding numbers and these defensive stats, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, Sekou, he's going to be a league winner," and it lasted for maybe a week and a half. So, but I mean, hey, 2nd year for Sekou. And he was like the youngest player in the NBA last year too. So he's still an interesting prospect to keep your eye on. But yeah, what about you, Marcus? There's a lot of different names that we could touch on here, but is there any that are most important to you?
No, I think you went through most of them. I had to get my Detroit comment in there. I'm a Michigan native, big Detroit fan, and so I just can't help but just and in awe about some of the decisions. You bring balling on the team, but conversation for another day. All good. But anyway, no, I think you hit it just right. I mean, Jeremy Grant resting, that's very random. I really didn't see that, right? But yeah, it's very crazy. But no, I think what is going on, the Saben guy who you mentioned, he really just kind of came out of nowhere, right? Even with Dennis Smith Jr. getting the big burn of those minutes, I feel like he's just kind of outplaying him right now, and he's definitely the favorite there. So I think he has the most value, benefiting from all of the other guys who are out, who aren't playing. I mean, I think we'll see an uptick, as you mentioned with Sekou and those guys with Jeremy Grant. So out, so that should be interesting to see how they kind of fill in there. Other than that, no, I think that, sums it up pretty well for the Pistons in tonight.
Perfect. So then, what do you got for us on the Pelicans side?
Well, first thing to mention, we got Steven Adams returning tonight, so it'd be good to have him back. Make sure you put him in your lineups if you have him out already. And I think, obviously what we were seeing with kind of like Willie Hernangomez was getting a nice, some nice run there, putting up some solid numbers while he was out. I think we got to assume that Steven Adams will just go back into his usual role, right? We'll see him playing and probably just see Willie be non-existent going forward unless any other injury comes back or anything. So other than that, everything is, he's the only injury. Everything else is kind of as expected. I will say, as a noteworthy thing for the Pels, Josh Hart seems to really be finding a nice groove, right? And I think he's a borderline 12 team ad, personally. He looks really good. He's playing dynamic. It's always interesting when you can get a guard who really racks it up in the rebounding category and still maintains their kind of guard stats and stuff. So I think he's a guy to definitely look out for. If he's floating around your waiver wire and 3 games left, including tonight, I definitely think he's worth taking a flyer on. Well, I'd ride it out. So
totally agree.
That's all I got for the Pels.
Yeah, they're aside from Josh Hart, they're a pretty straightforward team from a fantasy perspective. So we'll go on to the Spurs visiting the Thunder. Spurs missed all of last week, close to a week and a half now, with 4 COVID diagnoses. Derek White, Keldon Johnson, Rudy Gay, and Devin Vassell all are out with health and safety protocols. DeMar DeRozan is out for this game, dealing with a personal matter. I believe it was the passing of his father, which, our condolences to DeMar, and he'll take all the time necessary to get right. And then LaMarcus Aldridge is of note. He's going to be playing tonight. And even more interesting, since we started recording, the Spurs released their starting lineup for the night. Very limited group, by the way, with all those names I just mentioned, and all of them are like really important rotation players. But for tonight, they have DeJounte Murray at point guard. I believe it was Lonnie Walker at the shooting guard. Luka Samanic. I've never said his name before, but he's starting at small. Samanic. He's playing at small forward. Trey Lyles is at power forward. And interestingly, Jakob Poeltl is still starting at center. And that is with the note that there is no minutes restrictions for LaMarcus Aldridge. So I thought that was pretty interesting because I know everyone is really, when it comes to Aldridge, we'll start with him first. Everyone's been riding that Jakob Poeltl stream. He's been fantastic as the starting center. Pretty much everything that we would expect when he's been given that opportunity. But the way it's gone in Greg Popovich's rotation is that he and Aldridge are splitting the center minutes, and that is it. No one else gets involved there. Aldridge has been really bad this year. Looks like he's lost a step athletically. It's kind of tough to envision whether he can pick it back up. We'll see after he's had this opportunity to nurse that hip issue. But it's encouraging, at least for those of you who have Jakob Poeltl rostered, that he's still starting. And I think it's important that if you do have him on your team, don't preemptively drop. I mean, I think it's fair to assume that Aldridge is going to eventually cut into his minutes in a way that reduces his fantasy value, but we just don't know. The Spurs are playing well. They're a good position in the standings, and Poeltl has been really good for them this year. He's helped he's a winning basketball player for them right now. So I think it's interesting. We'll see how it goes there. I think that I would imagine that center rotation, even with all the people out right now, stays consistent between him and Aldridge. So I'm curious to see those minute splits tonight and whether or not Poeltl starts going forward. And then real quick, as far as how to look at this team going forward without those 4 key guys out with COVID, I think we're going to see a lot of offense going through DeJounte Murray and Lonnie Walker tonight in particular. DeMar, obviously, once he gets back in, he will be a big offensive force. But I think that those 2 guys and Patty Mills as well, a lot of the offense is going to flow through those 3. So I think if you're looking for a streamer, Patty Mills might be an interesting one because, I mean, he's been good all year. But he's going to play a lot of minutes tonight. He's going to be a good source of points, threes, and perhaps even an assist. Pop trusts him too. Pop's about to start playing a lot of guys that he doesn't trust, like the discount Luka in the starting lineup. I'm not trying to come for him right there. That was kind of mean, but he hasn't played before, this guy. Yeah. So Patty Mills is a mainstay there. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity, and he's the guy I'd be looking to add for the next week or so as we wait to see how the Spurs deal with this. What about you, Marcus? Anything that you would touch on here?
No, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. The most noteworthy thing to me was the fact that they announced, and I'm not sure if you've seen this, they announced LaMarcus Aldridge as a starter, and then they corrected the lineup. Yeah, they actually announced him as a starter, and
but then they
corrected it. Yeah, and then Podol was actually listed as a starter. So I think
the media couldn't believe it either.
Yeah, I think to your point, that really just kind of sums it up. How that was kind of a curveball, but he's getting older. Podol's looking good in his role. You want to just develop, that younger talent while you can. Obviously, Podol came over in that deal for that sent he and DeMar over to San Antonio on the Kawhi deal. So I mean, they want to utilize him. They like what he can do, and he's obviously a part of their future. So I think LaMarcus Aldridge is definitely kind of. I mean, me personally, and I jumped the gun on this. If I could do it again, I wouldn't have. I dropped him when he was out because I was kind of ridden with injuries and I wasn't sure my IR was full, and I regret that. But at the same time, not much of me does because we just seen what he was doing when he was playing big minutes, right? And he could get hot and get 20 points in the first half and then just kind of taper off from there. So I'm not saying drop him, but I'm saying I think going forward, we're unfortunately not just going to see the top 50 player that we've seen with LaMarcus Aldridge in previous years. And I think it's safe to say we're lucky if he gets to be top 100, right? He's been putting up serviceable value. If you have him, that's great. But outside of that, Podol's a guy. And I think if you have him, definitely hold on tight because I won't be surprised as things go on. LaMarcus Aldridge will, get in where he can play. But I think I wouldn't be surprised even over these next two games if we see him play kind of a minutes cap, if you will. I just don't see him getting a high burn in minutes when he doesn't have to. So, yeah.
Agreed. And look, at the end of the day, it's a what have you done for me lately league, and the Spurs are in a competitive position right now. Jakob Poeltl's a big part of that. And Aldridge he does help that team, but I don't know. Poeltl's the future and he's productive right now. So it's a very fascinating dynamic to watch going forward. And like you said, I think that Poeltl's on hold until we have a reason not to. So what about OKC? What do you got?
Well, one player I just kind of want to start with there. I know for me is Isaiah Roby. I think this week it's important to note that obviously they played the two games, but without Horford being out, one of those back-to-backs and them having one.
Marcus, we lost you a little bit there.
Can you hear me? Sorry,
I can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
He can be a pretty good streamer. I definitely think Al Horford may miss, the other game, so that can make for a good opportunity to stream him in if you get another game of Isaiah Roby in the starting lineup. Other than that, not really. View. I think George Hill's still out. Obviously, Trevor Ariza hasn't been with the team. So, and as far as the playing time and everything, I think OKC is another one of those teams that's pretty straightforward, right? We've kind of seen the teetering between Diallo and Dort, between them getting hot and having good runs and getting the same burn of minutes, but just kind of not doing much with it. So I think SGA's the Sherlock there. Obviously, Al Horford when he plays. Darius Bazley, he's getting a running opportunity, but he just hasn't taken that next step forward. So I think it's just kind of another night in OKC other than that, and those things to watch for. So
Teo Maledon's the only other name that really sticks out to me. Yeah, just because he's got that starting role, but he hasn't really produced with it all that much yet, at least in those 5 games back from when he missed with COVID. But he does have upside with threes and steals. It's just going to be a matter of him putting it all together. But I think that role is there to stay. But Thunder, pretty simple to kind of go over at the moment. We have 2 games left. The Hornets and the Suns are our next one. Quick just interjection here. We got news on the Rockets, who we touched on earlier. Victor Oladipo is in and he will start. PJ Tucker was ruled in as well, which we already expected, and Eric Gordon's available to play. So if those two are both active and out there tonight, that's really going to impact David Nwaba and Sterling Brown the most, those 2 guys that we touched on. And it will have an impact on Jayshawn Tate and Daniel House as well. I just feel that those 2 because of their respective roles, as Tate is this multi-dimensional defender and House as this stretch four. I think their roles are a little safer with those guys back at the moment. But I do feel that David Nwaba, who, I mean, look, he still might play as well too, a decent amount to produce value. But those, I think it's just worth noting that Brown's definitely out of the rotation at that point, and there might not be enough shots to go around for everyone to be productive. So interesting stuff to keep track of in Houston tonight, now that most of their guys are going to be in there. Mm-hmm. So we're going to Hornets visiting the Phoenix Suns. On the Charlotte side, Gordon Hayward I believe he was ruled in for this game with his hand issue, which is a big relief to all Hornets fans out there, because and if you have him on your fantasy team, which Marcus, I assume you do, based on that reaction.
Yes, man.
Yes, because we all know how it goes with Hayward. He's had a lot of bad luck with injury, and this hand issue in particular was one that he had already dealt with this season. I believe it was the same hand/wrist area that he injured the first time, but it looks like he's avoided the worst after having to leave his last game early, so he's in. Devontae Graham continues to be out with his knee issue, which means that there's really nothing that I'm interested in following with this Hornets team right now. Once Graham comes back, that's going to create interesting questions about that backcourt rotation between him, LaMelo, and Terry Rozier. But until then, those two are going to continue to just absolutely cook. Hornets side of things, I think we know what to expect there. Anything you agree, Marcus, or is there someone I should touch on?
Definitely agree. One thing I want to mention, it looks like PJ Washington is starting to heat up a little bit.
Yeah, him too.
I will say, yeah. You take it with a grain. Like, I love PJ, I love his game, but he was largely benefiting when Zeller was out. So as long as Zeller's playing, right, then PJ, his value would just vary game to game as he thrives in the small ball role. And if they had that center there in Zeller, they may not go with that on a nightly basis. But I don't know. It's not new. I feel like we see this every year with Cody Zeller, where he's getting the minutes, right? He's doing okay, and he just can't remain consistent in his play, So, that's something to pay attention to. Cody Zeller could be a potential drop, if he's just kind of putting up minimal numbers. He looked good when he came back, but now it's starting to taper off. And
he's on the downturn right
around
now.
Your waiver wire. And I definitely would pick PJ up if, he just flat out outplays Zeller, right? And then too soon, but that could even mean more Biyombo. So we'll see about that. But no, I think everything else is pretty straightforward, like you said, for sure.
So what do we feel about Phoenix then?
Well, as far as Phoenix, not much to not really much to report, right? You got everyone starting. They really have no big injuries out. I feel like this is a team, especially them being third. I think third in the Pacific, but fourth in the West, I believe, right?
I think so. Very competitive nonetheless. I mean, they are a legitimate, playoff team.
Sure.
Fringe contender caliber Western Conference team.
Absolutely. Yep. So, and I say that to say, I feel like that's just a testament to what's been working for them. They really haven't changed how they've been playing, and, the usual guys getting burned. I think everything's pretty straightforward there. So, yeah. How about you? Anything stick out to you?
I didn't write anything in my notes in Phoenix.
Right, yeah.
There's just nothing,
straightforward team, yeah.
Very straightforward. As Chris Paul teams tend to be, frankly. Everyone's role is pretty consistent. The power forward rotation is just kind of a mess. So I know we've been watching Jay Crowder at different points and Cam Johnson at different points, but I'm staying away from all of them if they're all healthy. So without further ado, we have our last game of the night. The Los Angeles Lakers, the stumbling Los Angeles Lakers visiting the Utah Jazz. A lot of people have been making some, a lot has been made of the Lakers' recent stretch, which has come without Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroeder, who's in health and safety protocols. And, this team's biggest issue is just where they're going to be generating their offense tonight. We're just kind of watching the shot distribution on this team. Without those two in the lineup in those last three games, we've seen LeBron obviously take an uptick. He's up to 24 shots per game, which is about 5 higher than his season average. Kuzma's about 17 shots per game. Harrell's at 12, and KCP is at 9. All four of those guys have taken jumps, obviously, because where else is the offense going to be generated from if not from those main guys? And as far as on your waiver wire, you're watching. Kuzma's not going to be there. The name recognition and the Davis news has probably plucked him out of everywhere. he's just going to continue to see an even larger offensive share without Schroeder. Wes Matthews is going to be playing more rotation minutes, as we've seen without Schroeder, but he's not on the fantasy radar. It's a matter of if Alex Caruso can get to that starting minute share in my mind. He's got that interesting fantasy game and the realistic path to get there without Schroeder. He's been pretty much limited to like that low to mid 20s share of minutes since in these last 3 games. But if Frank Vogel just lets him go off and sort of produce for a while, he's shown a propensity to be involved with the threes, assists, and steals. So he's kind of that sleeper. And if it's a blowout, then Talen Horton-Tucker sees a lot more minutes too. And we know all about his fantasy game. But really, I mean, the Lakers are kind of, they're as straightforward as a fantasy team as they were before. They're just missing some star power. There's no real names that I think you need to be monitoring on your waiver wire in any intense way. What about you? Do you feel that way about them?
No, I absolutely do. And, we've just seen it before with these LeBron-led teams and having that other star guy out. It's just like, who's going to step up and just chip in where they can. Even with guys like Kuzma getting the run, like in theory, he should get a big game, and he's been, a good source of points, threes, blocks. But it's just kind of like it's really hard to tell on a game-to-game basis. We've seen Montrezl Harrell pick up. We've seen Gasol get a nice uptick with the blocks and everything and defensive numbers. But it's obviously going to run through LeBron. I think other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So
agreed. Yeah. So without our last team on the night, the Utah Jazz, take it away.
Yeah. Well, once again, I hate to sound redundant, but I think the Jazz, they're a pretty straightforward team too.
About as straightforward as they get, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, you have some guys who can. We probably all know about Royce O'Neal, obviously, but it's not even that he's like an under the radar guy because he can have a game where he plays 40 minutes and puts up solid numbers and plays 40 minutes and scores 0 points, right? So it's just like, we know who Royce O'Neal is. We know these guys, and most of them are rostered. I guess a fringe guy, Derek Favors, but that's more in the absence of injury. So everything else is pretty straightforward there. They don't really have any injuries. Mike Conley came back a few games ago, and probably everyone in that second and first unit is mostly owned or not really worth streaming, I would say, for now. So
agreed.
That's the Utah Jazz for you. It'd be curious to see if they can beat the Lakers, So
it'd be a fun game to watch, certainly, especially with all the, the narratives about just kind of watching LeBron will this team to a win. He's talking about he's not taking nights off. We'll see. The Lakers are in no real danger in my mind, but I would love to see a healthy matchup between them and the Jazz because, as we all know, Utah's been awesome this year in real life. Maybe they finally make it over the hump this year. But we'll see. That's going to be it for us, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. If you, again, please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this, for breaking news reactions and exciting stuff that we have in the works. We are we love doing these. We're looking forward to doing more with y'all. Follow us on Twitter, my handle down below. Follow Marcus at Mark_Anthony35, right?
Yes, sir. Yep, you nailed it.
I remembered. Follow Marcus. Great first show. I hope that we see more. Guys, enjoyed tonight's games. We'll check in with you tomorrow, where I'm not sure who's hosting, but we'll find out.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. So take it easy, everyone, and we will see you next time.
See you guys. Thank you.